Agriculture on the move.
Agricole mouvement.
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 Good day, people, and welcome again to another program, Agriculture on the Move. I am Phillip Sydney. Today's program is very opportune because we are going into the dry season. And of course, we were told that we are going to expect a very dry season this year. We had some dry spell last year, and of course we were able to survive, but this year is going to be very difficult for our farming community. With me today to discuss preparation for the dry spell is Mr. Elvis Herelle to my far right, who is the regional supervisor in the extension service in the Ministry of Agriculture, head of Region 7, and Mr. Constantin, the first name?
Thaddeus.
Thaddeus Constantin, who is an agronomist, of course, in the ministry attached to the Research and Development Division. Welcome to the program, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Before I really delve into the nitty-gritty of the program, I just want to wish to the 8th of March is International Women's Day. For whatever reasons, whatever they do, and whatever activity they are involved with, they have done very well. So we want to applaud them and wish them well on that day. But I also want to zero in on the women in agriculture. There are lots of women in the agricultural sector that have contributed meaningfully and are still contributing meaningfully to this sector. I can recall the Rural Women Cluster, that group. They're involved in processing, added value to the agricultural sector. In the Ministry of Agriculture, there are a number of women in agriculture in the various divisions, various units. In the vet, we have our chief vet, who is Dr. King, who is a woman, and there are a number of other women within that same division. In extension, there are a number of extension officers. Christine Glasgow is one I can recall, and there's Adelaide Idovic, a number of them in extension. I won't mention all their names because I can't go that far. You know, in propagation, you have Alicia George, another strong lady, Cynthia Lionel in the agro-processing section, and the list goes on and on. In the fishing sector, again, we have women who are involved in fishing. All right, we have Miss Theodore in V4, who is a boat owner, and she's doing quite well. So I just want to wish all of you a happy International Women's Day. But I cannot go without saying something about the greatest woman for me, my mom, who was a farmer, who was also involved in cottage industry, who worked hard and got herself involved anytime there was an agricultural exhibition. She produced a number of commodities stemming from pepper oil, and the list goes on and on and on. So I just want to remember she's passed, but she got me into agriculture. She wanted me to be involved in the sector, and that's where I am today. I'm happy for that. In fact, I kept on saying, Mom, if you were alive, I would ask you to slap me again, because you shaped me, you know, and I'm happy to be here today to represent, you know, the agricultural sector at that level. So I'm really thankful for this. So to everybody out there, every woman out there, happy International Women's Day. So gentlemen, to the topic.
Yes.
Preparation for the dry season. Elvis, I'll start with you because you are more or less directly involved with the farmers. You know the problems. What do you see happening out there? Give us a little history when it comes to dry season. What are the bottlenecks and what do you think the farmers should be doing?
Okay, thank you once again for having me on your program. The problem presently that our farmers are facing is that the climate is definitely changing. I don't think there is a farmer out there who will say to you that it is not. Just standing in the open, you could actually feel the intensity of the heat on the back, you know. So definitely the climate is changing. There is less water available. And we are told that with this phenomena of climate change that we expected to experience even drier spells, drier conditions this year. What is it our farmers need to do? There are a number of things that they can do. Whatever precipitation, whatever rainfall that we're going to get between now and, say, the end of the dry spell, our farmers need to do everything possible to conserve, to store that water. They could do that in tanks, they could do that in drums, they could do that even in the soil itself, right? In terms of the soil, one of the things that we can do to conserve the water in the soil is to encourage the infiltration, percolation of the water into the soil. You know, at this time, very little plowing should be done, right? Because if you go in and you plow the soil now, whatever water that would enter that soil will evaporate easily. It will evaporate quickly. So there is no need for our farmers to do any plowing at this time. Those farmers who have already plowed, for example, one of the things that they could do is to mulch. If they have planted, there is need to mulch. And pretty soon, there will be an abundance of seaweed along the shores.
That is true.
Okay? So our farmers now need to probably go in and harvest, collect that seaweed, and start to mulch the soil. That is the only way we could reduce the evapotranspiration that is going to take place.
Okay, before you continue, I want to go to Mr. Constantin, because as an agronomist, going back a bit to what you have experienced over the years, and what we're going to be experiencing, what are the causes of, I mean, we talk about El Nino, El Niña, but I mean, added to that, are there any other reasons why we are experiencing or going to experience that severe dry spell?
The main reason for the severe dry spell is the El Nino that's been brewing in the Atlantic and the Pacific, and it hasn't simmered down, it hasn't died down. It was expected to die down in the fall of last year. However, it has not. That phenomenon changes the weather conditions globally. It's a global phenomenon. Small island states like ourselves, what we have to do is to adapt our technologies now to fit the new climate. We're not saying that we'll not be able to farm. We need to start thinking of farming in a different way, because this is the only way to combat the dry conditions that are coming. Think of farming differently. Aquaponics and hydroponics, they sound like they use a lot of water. They actually use a lot less water. Ponds, making sure there's no leakage in water lines. Protecting waterways is something that we haven't done. When I was a child, I used to jump into a basse at Rockall. That basse doesn't exist now. I cannot take my daughters to see that basse. We've lost all of our waterways.
But why?
Deforestation is the biggest problem, and the encroachment of our communities. We build communities, but we do not pay attention to the waterways. And so we build drains, and the drains do not lead to anywhere. That water is lost. That surface water is lost. And we've lost a lot of our rivers because of the way we've farmed and the way our communities have encroached on these waterways.
So, going forward, I am hearing a lot of terminologies, climate change or smart agriculture and whatever. As a technician, can you elucidate and tell the public exactly what are the various ways, like the various varieties of crops that can adapt to the dry spell? But before we go into this, we are due for our first break. When we come back, we will discuss this. You are due for our first break. Back soon.
Messieurs et dames, Mamay Saint-Lucie, tan sa, est-ce savent l'année chimique agricole avec l'autre chimique nous ka servi en caille, ka échoué en pays sans registrer, et que ça peut affecter santé publique là. Généralement, l'année yon comité en place qui ni responsabilité pour registrer, contrôler et bail permission pour toute chimique qui ka entré en Saint-Lucie. Pour importer ces chimiques ça là, fait yon application pour joindre en licence. Pour plus d'informations, contactez Office Research en Lyon, en ministre agricole, numéro téléphone 468-5600 et bien 468-560D. Messieurs, pas mener pièces vieilles chimiques qui pas registrées pour dommager santé PPIA souple. Information ça a sorti par ministre agricole.
Welcome back to the program Agriculture on the Move. In preparing for the dry spell or any dry spell, this one I was told it's going to be severe. Apart from using all the methodologies that Elvis mentioned earlier, but there are so many others I think that we can discuss. I would like that to be discussed deep so that farmers can understand. And this is the question of various new varieties that are able to stand the drought. Can you give us some?
Okay, drought-resistant cultivars are very useful. However, even though we call them drought-resistant, they do need water. So what we would try to do is to use plants that require less water than the conventional cultivars that we're accustomed to. Another thing is to also think of shifting farming systems. Moving farming systems where a great quantity of the plants on the farm do not require irrigation, and they tend to be drought hardy. We had the introduction of one potential crop in the dragon fruit when the Taiwanese brought it in a few years ago. A lot of people saw it as a problem waiting to happen. However, it can be a great solution for our farmers because it would allow our farmers to earn some income in the peak of the dry season. Protection of infrastructure also is very key. Ensuring, for example, all buildings on the farm, we're able to harvest all of the water that comes out of it. When that water is harvested, it should be filtered. A problem with the irrigation systems on many of our farms is that the water goes in unfiltered. And we filter it just before it gets into the drip lines. But we need it filtered all along the way to protect the pumps, to protect the lines from blockage. Blocked lines tend to burst. These lines tend to be under pressure. Protection of all the irrigation equipment is really, really, really important. There are other things that can be done. The use of shade houses is little used technology in St. Lucia, but it is very effective in reducing evapotranspiration. It will still allow the farmer to use the rainwater, the little precipitation that would come in, and the little dew that would come in, but it would also allow him to protect the crop and reduce evapotranspiration. If we reduce evapotranspiration, it means we could reduce the amount of times we have to water in the week.
But before we continue, you said there are cultivars that are tolerant, all right? You mentioned the dragon fruit, but are there any other, say, short-term crops, vegetables, that are sort of tolerable to the drought conditions? Because I think that's what farmers probably would like to know for the way forward. You know,
I think Elvis.
Yeah, there are some crops that can be grown during the dry spell with less water. For example, I mean, beans is one crop, okay, that does well with under stressful conditions. But we should not just restrict it to vegetables. I mean, there are crops. I mean, cassava. Right. Cassava does very well. You know, there are things like, I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, the mung bean was introduced into our cropping system and never took up. So we need to reintroduce the mung bean. Okra is another crop that does very well. Depending on your location, right, you could strategize and use dashing as one of those crops. You see, I think one of the things that we need to do is that to help farmers identify in their enterprise which crops that they use as cash crops, which crops are used for food in the household. And based on that, you strategize. So for example, if you want, I mean, the food security of the household is important, then you look at probably crops like the macambu, you look at crops like the cassava, you look at crops like tanya,
Plantain.
the plantain to a lesser extent. You look at crops like the tanya, I said, right? These are crops, edos, right? These are the crops that you would rely on to give that household that sustainability with regards to food security. In terms of cash crops, then you would look at the other crops like, say, the beans, the okra, you see? But there again, these has to be looked at with your market. You look at your history of the market, right? And then you base your production based on that. But it is important that the security, the household security in terms of food is first looked upon, and then you looked at what are the other crops you use to bring in the income. But there's also another point I would like to raise. Sometime last year, the ministry gave a number of water tanks to our farmers. And I know that a number of these tanks are still waiting to be installed. Now is the time for the farmers to go in and install those tanks, because the need, the utility of those tanks will become very high as that dry spell prolongs.
What do you have in place as the extension officer responsible for the farmers in your region? With that dry spell coming on, are there any programs in terms of educating them, or a refresher kind of for preparation for the dry season? Okay.
Well, one of the things that we're hoping to do is to have a farmers training with water and soil conservation. And in that training, we're hoping to reintroduce some of the simple techniques that would help to conserve soil moisture. Like I said earlier, the question of mulching, right? I mean, we've just established in a demonstration plot, and one of the key things that is included in that is the use of the plastic mulch. Two reasons for that. We wanted to cut down the cost of labor, and we wanted to conserve soil moisture. And we're hoping to take a number of farmers to that demonstration plot so that they could see some of the simple things that can be done to conserve soil moisture.
And they're not that costly?
No, it's not. It's not. Because it saves, just in the case of labor, right, you save using a plastic mulch.
Yes.
I have also another piece of information that might be useful for the farmers. When the seaweed is used as a mulch, the seaweed tends to be very alkaline. In our soils, we have a huge problem with acidity. Our plants feed efficiently in conditions where we have between 5.5 and 6.5. Our soils are way below that. The use of the seaweed as a mulch is a free mulch, firstly. It's a soil amendment because it brings in very high levels of nitrogen. All of the seaweed that we've tested has had more than 150 pounds per acre of nitrogen. That's very high.
It's very high, yes.
But along with that, it brings in a very good pH of 8, between 7.6 and 8. That pH is phenomenal. Efficiency for plants depends on how well it can use its water. If you water a plant and it cannot feed, it will not grow. You'll be throwing that water away. If we could ensure that our plants are able to feed efficiently, it means we can use our water efficiently. And so the use of the seaweed, though a lot of farmers see it as something that they shouldn't put on their farms. As soon as we get rid of the chlorides, we wash them out, it is magic. It is magic on the land. You don't have to plow it in. You could just drop it on fresh.
Okay.
It is magic on the land.
And it's free.
And it's free.
All right. Okay.
But I would like to
But before we continue, we do for another break. We're moving fast and furious. You're watching Agriculture on the Move. We're due for our second break. We'll be back soon. Stay tuned.
Do you know what a GMO is?
It's genetically modified organism.
It's a genetically modified organism.
That's absolutely right. A GMO is a plant or animal organism which contains genes taken from a different plant or animal to create a set of desired characteristics. For example, a gene taken from a fish and infused in the cellular membrane of a tomato to create a frost-resistant tomato. The technology is designed to improve the quality of agricultural produce for consumption, but its long-term effects are not known. Join the Ministries of Agriculture and Sustainable Development in implementing the National Biosafety Framework, aimed at providing information on GMOs and LMOs in ensuring that they are used, handled, and transported in a manner that is safe to the environment and human health.
Welcome back. Elvis, you're making a point a while ago concerning the root system of the plant. Can you tell us a little more on this?
Yeah. I normally tell the farmers of my region, Region 8, that the roots of a plant should be seen or equated to our mouth. The roots is the mechanism through which the plant takes in its food. So if the roots are sawed, the plant will not function properly. Mm-hmm. And by extension, you will not get the yields that you're looking for. So the onus is on us to do everything possible to protect that root system of the plant so that we could get the yields that the plant is known to produce. So that is very important. So the question of lowering the temperature, right, conserving water for the roots to function is of extreme importance.
Okay. There are various methods of irrigation. I know you have the sprinkler irrigation, which is overhead. You also have flood irrigation, you have drip irrigation. Which one can you tell the farmers that, and also look at the cost of the three, which one you think that is more cost effective and more efficient as we're going into that dry spell?
Okay, off the bat, drip irrigation system is more efficient, and in the long term, it is more, less costly. You use less water, right? And the plant is better able to use the water that you applied because it comes in drips, hence the reason why it is called a drip system. However, if you are a producer of leafy vegetables, for example, lettuce. Lettuce is one of the few crops that likes to feel water on the leaf. So it is always advisable, especially, for example, if you're in a greenhouse, apart from having your drip system, to have a little mist system where occasionally you would come in and wet the leaves of that leafy vegetable. Outside of that, I would go and recommend the drip irrigation system right through.
Okay. The greenhouse production vis-a-vis open air, would you all suggest going into a drought period that the greenhouse is better for use?
Yes,
I'm just throwing it out.
It is definitely better because the production is more intensified. So you have more, your plant population is higher per area. Okay, so in that sense it is better, and you make greater use of whatever resource, whatever little water that is available. So it is always better. One little point that is that in the greenhouse, since we're going into the dry season, one of the things that can be done is to remove the plastic, right? If you remove the plastic, then you provide yourself with that opportunity to benefit from whatever prevailing winds that will blow across that greenhouse, thereby lowering the temperature. If you don't want to do that, what you could do is to install a thermal screen. Now, what the thermal screen is basically you use what we call a Sarah netting or sheet cloth, and you put it over the greenhouse, or you put it inside the greenhouse. What it would do, it would cut down the light that is not necessary what we would in local palace call the bad light, right? That light is what generates the heat. So it would cut it down and help the plant to produce better.
Right.
On this greenhouse point, protected agriculture in St. Lucia has been looked at only as tunnels.
Right.
However, in protected agriculture, it is anything that we can do to protect the crop. In the dry season, one of the things we want to protect the crop from is evapotranspiration. We want to ensure that the crop does not lose water excessively. Shade houses or the installation of shade mesh over the crop. For example, you have 1,000 tomato plants. You don't have a greenhouse. However, you could put a few poles, string up some cable, and run saran mesh over it. It's very inexpensive, but very effective. Greenhouses also, we need to start thinking of greenhouses in St. Lucia as they need to get taller. They're too short, especially for this time of year.
The hot air rises.
The hot air rises. Passive cooling systems are important in our structures at this point. For
When you
our
say
animals,
passive cooling system, what do you mean?
Systems that will allow vacuums to be created within a building. And as we have vacuums being created, we have air, fresh air moving into the vacuum.
Okay.
And so these passive systems will allow airflow across the building.
Correct.
We've been looking at crops, however, our livestock at this time suffer tremendously. Our birds, our pigs. Cooling for these structures can also increase the farmer's intake of capital, of money. We need to look at how we provide water to the animals efficiently, but also how the animals and the plants use that water efficiently, reduce the usage of water. Another technology that is starting to pick up steam on the island is the use of hydroponics, which is using water to carry nutrients, and the use of aquaponics, aquaculture, but aquaponics. Aqua and hydro, it sounds like it's a lot of water, but the plants sometimes use only 1/10 of they would use in a regular greenhouse. In open field, they might even use less than that. So thinking of farming in a different way, we need to really start looking at farming as a business, but a business that is entwined with water and how efficiently we're able to use that water.
You know that farmer has to be very smart technologically.
Yes.
Final words from you. You have about 2 seconds.
Yeah. I think now is the time for our farmers to seriously consider water harvesting at all costs. There is no reason why, for example, a farmer with a greenhouse should not be conserving water, should not be harvesting water. There is no reason why a farmer who has a pig pen or who is in broiler production or layer production should not be harvesting water. The roof is there. We need to find mechanisms that would allow the farmer to start invest in those areas to conserve water, because water is key. That's right. Life.
We need to start also looking at our simple technologies like ram pumps. For the farming community, we are able to make them at research and at engineering. Ram pumps and wind-powered pumps. These are free energy pumps. Also, our ponds. We need to pay attention to our ponds. We need to ensure that our ponds are built in the right areas, and if the area is not appropriate, to recommend the correct type of pond for the farmer.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I hope the farmers have gotten enough information, and you all will continue, of course, to interact with them so that they can get information to at least sustain them throughout that heavy dry spell that's expected. Thanks again for being here. You've been watching Agriculture on the Move. We'd like to thank you, the viewers, for viewing, and also view this program every week as we bring to you information. Farmers, we are expecting a dry spell. Please take heed, conserve moisture, harvest water, and you'll be successful. Again, happy International Women's Day to all women in St. Lucia, especially the women in agriculture. Thank you again for viewing. I'm Phillip Sydney saying goodbye.
Agriculture on the Move.
Agricole mouvement.
Agriculture on the Move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the Move.
Agricole mouvement.
Agriculture on the Move.
Agricole en mouvement.